opposite of what we have today, right? Today, we don't have anything near sound money. We have a political money. It's a fiat money. It's a money that whose value is, recklessly manipulated by the powers in charge.
Welcome, everybody. This is Jim Forsythe, Chair of Citizens for Sound Money, and I'm pleased today to have our Executive Director, Marian with us, and Jp Cortez of soundmoneydefense.org, and he's the Policy Director, and really excited by what he is doing and really looking forward to collaborating with him. So welcome, JP.
Thank you guys for having me on. It's great to talk to fellow advocates, fellow fans of sound money.
And before we get started on what specifically you guys do, I'd like to ask everybody that comes on, why sound money is so important, and put it in your own words.
Yeah. So I think this is such a big question and so broad. You can go so many different ways with it. Sometimes it's interesting to examine like the history of it, the history throughout the world, the history here in the United States. Sometimes it's interesting to examine like the econ effects as far as stable purchasing power of money throughout time and how that benefits a society. So there are a lot of different ways to approach sound money. And I think I like talking about sound money by describing what it isn't. That's probably the easiest way for me to do it. And that is largely, sound money is the opposite of what we have today, right? Today, we don't have anything near sound money. We have a political money. It's a fiat money. It's a money whose value is, recklessly manipulated by the powers in charge. And that is literally the exact opposite of sound money, because sound money is that market-based money, right? It's money whose value is not derived or attributed by the government. This is money that has been tested by the free market and has sustained its purchasing power for long periods of time. So money being, that's what money is. That's what sound money is. It's not political money. It is wholesome, honest money. And that's important for two reasons, right? The first is that sound money allows people to plan. What I was mentioning earlier about society and the importance of sound money. When a society is unable to plan for the future, when people aren't able to save, when there is no capital accumulation that is taking place, there is no infrastructure being built, and there is no, increase or improvement of standard of living. This is how people are lifted out of poverty. This is what causes societies to flourish. And so with uncertainty that comes with not including sound money in your monetary system, it's difficult for societies, for individuals to plan for the future. The second one is maybe the bigger, more important one, that sound money acts as a defense. It's a prophylactic. It's a bulwark against a government that would get too big, that would, if not chained by golden shackles, might, needlessly fight endless wars, or might needlessly go through and harass its own citizens with horrible domestic programs that often cost an absurd amount of money. And so sound money it attaches bumper rails onto a government, and it sort of constricts a government and what it is allowed to do.
Yeah, so I was in the military for 13 years, and that really hits home for me. Is you look at World War II, and we had to convince people to buy bonds, right? Mm-hmm. Because they couldn't just create the money. Right. The dollar was backed by gold, so they had to convince people to buy bonds. They had to convince them of the war effort. You don't have to do that now,
right? And that was very exactly, and that was done that's not an accident, right? It's not an accident that Nixon closed the gold window in '71. They was in the middle of the Vietnam War brewing, and they were trying to figure out how they could fund this really unpopular thing going on. And the way to do it was to whittle away the savings, to whittle away the purchasing power of the money.
Yeah, and I love your point about it being political money, because it's one thing for it to lose purchasing power. That kind of affects all holders equally. But the question is, if you're reducing purchasing power, that's through new dollar creation, and who's getting those new dollars, right? The government's getting the new dollars. The big corporations are getting the new dollars.
Exactly right. Yeah, what you're describing there is the Cantillon effect, right?
Yep,
the idea that central banks, when they create new money, it's the people closest to that central bank that benefit the most from it. So large corporations, big banks, government actors, these are people that, when here recently with what's happening with COVID and some of these stimulus packages, these are $1 trillion price tag packages. And this money is disseminated out through the economy, but it doesn't reach places equally or at the same time. So the new money comes out, people get to spend the money, rich people who are already connected into the political process, get this new money first, get to spend it. And by the time it trickles down to you, me, Marian, other supporters of sound money, non-supporters of sound money, anyone really, by the time the money trickles down to them, that money's already been devalued. So this $1,200 stimulus check that we got, right? Not to mention that this was part of what, a $6 trillion bill. So Americans got a real haircut as far as what we paid for and what Americans actually got. But even outside of it being a tiny amount, that tiny amount is watered down by the purchasing, by the price of everything going up. So not only are you like not giving Americans what they paid for, the little bit you are giving them isn't worth what it was, a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the best example of the Cantillon effect is, you look at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, the big banks, they're borrowing at 0%. And then your credit card fee, are 12, 18%. I went to ask about a small business loan and it was 9%. So yeah, if I was able to borrow at 0 and lend at 9, I could make lots of money. And then I see Goldman Sachs CEO now making $35 million. And I'm not one to, be against, good business people making a lot of money, but, they're making that money through borrowing at 0 and lending at a higher rate.
Right. That's not what this is. This isn't people providing quality value, providing a good or a service at a high level. This is, largely the benefits, and it comes at the harm of everyone else, but the benefits of being entrenched in a political system that has largely served or is created and functions as a way to benefit the people already politically connected.
Yeah. And yeah, it's my stance that the creation of the Fed was to serve the banks, not to serve the people.
Absolutely. Right. And that's,
well, it was created by the banks, right?
Right, exactly.
Why wouldn't they serve themselves? I mean, I can't blame them for being self-centered. I mean, that's kind of the heart of capitalism, but also we try to create value rather than rigging the system through the government. I think that's the major difference.
Yeah, exactly, right. And the Fed, like you're talking about an institution that was founded, that it was, created in a smoky back room somewhere. Not by people that were elected or that have any sort of accountability. So this is just like it is an arm now there, because there is no question to me that the idea that these are separate institutions, that the government and the Fed are separate institutions insulated from one another, is kind of a myth. It's a big fiction. These are all these parts are interworking. They all work together, in coordination to enrich the politically connected and to harm the little guy, the saver, the wage earner, the pensioner, the person on fixed income.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend Creature from Jekyll Island for people. You talked about classic. Creating it in the back room kind of thing. But the basic gist is people were getting wealthier and wealthier. They were borrowing less. They could, buy on consignment versus borrowing money, and they needed people to start borrowing money so they could be profitable. So they set this up as a way to encourage debt and discourage savings. And it's no surprise we are where we are today. So yeah,
that, and actually, sorry, because you just hit on, I think, a really important point. That's what it is right there. The discouragement of savings, right? Because when you have a monetary system that aggregate demand is what matters and money velocity is what matters, there is no like consideration to anything else really. It's these government metrics that sort of govern policy, that don't actually give a true reading of what an economy's health is like. So like, if you know that the money is going to continue to be inflated away, there is no good reason to save it, right? You're paying a tax, a penalty for choosing to save money. And that incentivizes consumerism. It incentivizes lack of saving, lack of planning. It incentivizes bad behavior.
Yeah, and 2008 showed us that in spades, and I think we're back to that again. So what? Talk to us about what you guys do to try to help turn the tide here.
Yeah, so the Sound Money Defense League, it's a policy project that we started in 2015. So we've been around for 6 or 7 years now, and I'm happy to say that we've had a couple of really great, successful legislative seasons over the couple of years that we've been active here. We work largely to restore gold and silver, constitutional sound money, and we do that by remonetizing it. Right now, one of the reasons that you don't really use gold and silver in transaction aren't necessarily because because it's old or because it's heavy or there are probably several reasons why, but maybe chief among them is the fact that the policies and the taxes that govern its use and its purchase make it untenable to do so, right? So if you wanted to use gold today in 9 states throughout the country, you would be charged with a sales tax if you chose to buy precious metals. And then when you go to sell the precious metals, if you enjoyed a gain, you're going to be hit with a capital gains tax on the federal level. And then across 47 or 48 states, you're going to get taxed again on the state level. So in some cases, you're talking about triple taxation. It's egregious. So it makes it impossible to use precious metals as a medium of exchange, as a form of transaction. And so we go around, removing the impediments, removing the obstacles to people being able to invest in precious metals if they would like to, individuals, businesses, but we also talk to states and work with states to give them the opportunity to at least have them have the option, if they wanted to store taxpayer funds or to store pension funds or reserve funds or trust funds that are taxpayer funded, that are owned by the state, and allowing or working to allow states to be able to hold those funds in precious metals. Because right now, many states legally are not allowed to invest taxpayer funds in precious metals. So we've been working for this year. The session started a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad to say we've been working with, Citizens for Sound Money, Campaign for Liberty. We've been working with a number of different groups, collaborating with a number of allies, groups in these project states and nationwide to spread the word about what we're doing here. Because as inflation becomes, a more hot button topic, these issues become more and more important. And individuals, businesses, and even states themselves are waking up to the reality that the dollar's on the way down, and we need to do something about this.
So I think Ohio has put gold into their pension fund, haven't they?
Yeah. Ohio was great. Last year, Ohio did, they did a lot of things. So last year, they eliminated the sales tax on precious metals. They had that before in the past, and it was repealed. And so that was reinstated this past year. And on top of that, the Ohio Fire and Police Pension Fund had about it's a $16 billion fund that they did 5% of the fund in physical gold. And so that you're talking about $800 million, close to $1 billion. And these bills, these measures that we're introducing are not bills that force the state to invest in gold and silver if they don't want to. It's simply a question of giving them the option to. As it becomes a more uncertain environment, as inflation becomes ever present, it's important that states, lawmakers, and individuals have the ability, if they choose to store in this inflation hedge that has been the case over centuries, over millennia.
Yeah, and with negative real rates now, some of these pension funds, the pensions are going to be a disaster if they continue to invest in fixed income.
Yeah, we are heading towards a pension disaster in this country. And you're right, that some of it is the metrics that they use to forecast returns. When you're planning on making 12% a year, you're not really giving yourself much room to work within that, because 12% a year is uncommon or unlikely. But even outside of that, right, these funds, many times they're allowed to invest in dollar denominated debt, risky assets, volatile assets, emerging world debt many times. And like you said, these are regularly, there's a negative real rate of return when you consider that inflation is at, its highest point in 40 years. That's 7% now. And so, yeah, these inflation, or rather these investment funds who claim that safety of principle is, the number one, many times, stated goal of the fund. And these are institutions that aren't holding a single ounce of gold.
Yeah, and gold is absent any, if physically held, it's absent any counterparty risk.
Exactly right.
Yeah, you can't say that about bonds for sure. I hadn't thought about it. So there's sales tax and there's capital gains tax. It would be wonderful to eliminate the federal capital gains tax, but at least in that case, you're only paying that if it has a gain. Now that's a nominal gain versus a real gain. So that reduces the inflation protection by having that. But the sales tax is really a big issue, because that is a transaction-based tax, which makes it impossible to use as money. And that is a state issue. So that's definitely highlights the importance of what you're doing, is going after that sales tax.
Yeah, and I think so. There are a lot of efforts that kind of are combined in this. So Alex Mooney out of West Virginia has a federal bill to eliminate that capital gains tax, and that would be huge, obviously, to be able to do it on the federal level. But as you guys know, as people that have been involved in these circles, right, the federal level is gridlock. There isn't really much that happens there. It's hard to get anything done. And so states are taking it upon themselves to say, hey, we don't have to be a victim to this. There are things that we can do to mitigate some of this damage. Sales tax is such an obvious one, because there is no other investment where states charge a sales tax. If you're buying stocks, bonds, ETFs, real estate, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. States don't charge a sales tax, because sales tax are taxes that are applied to final consumed goods. But these are assets that are held for resale. So for the same reason that you don't charge a sales tax on a stock, you shouldn't be charging one on gold and silver either.
Yeah, excellent point.
And I wanted to ask you about that, because you guys actually got that passed here in Arkansas in the last session. And so I was hoping, can you break down the process a little bit? Because I think there's a bit of a mystery about how it works for citizens to be involved in legislation. It's actually easier than people think. So can you talk through like what you've done where it's been successful, and then maybe what they can maybe do where they are?
Yeah, Marian, that's such an awesome question. And that is part of the work that we're doing. And I think the work that you guys are doing at Citizens for Sound Money, you can be an active participant in these battles, right? So we are introducing legislation, going state to state, and working these bills, and testifying in committees and contacting legislators. And anyone in the state can do that same thing. So please, I encourage anyone, if this is something you feel passionate about, to write an email to your legislator, to call your legislator, to testify before a committee if you feel inclined to do so, right? Because there are, as far as the state level goes, there is very little grassroots organization that exists. And so when a state switchboard gets 10 calls, when a state switchboard, a capital gets a dozen emails, they're like, oh my God, what have we done? We've really shaken up a hornet's nest. And so that's what it takes. Arkansas is such a great example of this grassroots individual led action, that because in Arkansas, originally we were not scheduled to have a hearing before the committee there, and we decided, we worked with Campaign for Liberty and other people in the state, and we sent out email blasts to all of our supporters and urged them to contact the committee chair. Please urge them to hold a hearing. Please talk to them. Tell them that this is important. And so one day my phone rings and I get a call from a very upset chair of the committee. Why are you sending all of these people my way? My phone hasn't stopped ringing. My email is blowing up. All of these people are calling me. Please stop sending these people my way. And this man was furious. And I understand why he was furious, but that's his job. And he should be hearing from the people in the state. And so I go back to Stephen Gleason, the director of the Sound Money Defense League, the president of Money Metals Exchange. And I say to him, Stephen, I just received this very upset phone call. What do we do? And it was a no-brainer. We double down. We continue the pressure. When the politicians are telling you, hey, you're talking, my time is being taken up too much on this, I'm hearing from too many people, that means we're doing something right. And that's when we got to keep the pressure on. And so being an active participant in your state legislature by calling, emailing, showing up to the Capitol, all of that is literally invaluable. And it is literally, without the help of the people on the ground, we would not have passed in Arkansas.
Yeah, you got to tell that guy is, oh, you want to stop the calls, then pass the bill.
Yeah, and they're
but that's what they had to do.
And I bet that's what he
had to get it out of committee.
But no, that's an excellent point. So I've been on the other side of that. I was a state senator, and they want us to believe that a small group of people, small group of vocal people, can't make a difference, and it's just not true.
Not true.
It's shocking how small of a group, how much a small group can have an impact. Because if you look at voting, like my district was 60,000 people. Half of those are registered, a smaller number are going to vote. A smaller number are going to vote straight along party lines. And so these elections are swung by a very small group of people. And they know that. And when you get, especially for issues like this, which are not really a partisan issue, in my opinion.
I completely agree.
Right.
Then you get a vocal group of independent people saying, hey, look, this is a big issue for me. And then they look at the political downside. So what's the downside of passing this? Well, not really much. So yeah, let's go for it. So I mean, we had the Democrats put forward a bill to restrict homeschooling, and it, as I remember, it wasn't completely well, it was completely awful. But you know what I'm saying? It was like a small incremental thing.
Sure.
But you had 400 people show up at the State House, and that's the big, and that doesn't sound like a lot of people, but 400 people is a bigger crowd than they've had for anything.
Oh yeah.
I mean, normally for any hearing, you can fit the people in the committee room, you can fit the people in the House galleries. They couldn't fit them in. They were spilling out on the lawns, and that bill was completely dead on arrival, despite very strong partisan support for it. It's dead.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, people can make an impact. I mean, at the federal level, yeah, it's a lot tougher. But at the state level, people can make a huge impact.
Yeah, there's a lot definitely that still can be done. And that's kind of why these state projects are so important. So, for example, right now we're working to eliminate that sales tax, that really egregious tax that we talked about earlier. In Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Hawaii, New Jersey, these are all states of the 9 states that still charge a sales tax. We have active legislation in 5 of them. So we have a chance to move the needle here, but it's going to require people in the state. And so if just to anyone listening, if you have any questions on this stuff, we have the Sound Money Index. It's a project that Sound Money does in collaboration with Money Metals Exchange. And we rank all 50 states by 12 different indicators that really mark which environments are pro sound money and which are anti sound money. So your top ones, your Texas, your Wyomings, your South Dakotas, those are states that have eliminated taxes, that in some cases have established bullion depositories, have through in their legislation have reaffirmed that gold and silver are money, and things very positive pro sound money measures like that have been passed in those top states. And then those bottom states, the Tennessees, the Kentuckys, the New Mexicos, the Vermonts of the world, those are the ones that really need the help, that really need the people on the ground to be able to get any traction at all. So if anyone is listening, is interested at all, we've got this Sound Money Index on moneymetals.com that ranks all the states. If you have any questions, if you're in a state where you're wondering what more can be done, please contact me at the Sound Money Defense League, Jim and Marian at Citizens for Sound Money. All of these groups are working in collaboration, and we're all a team here that ultimately want the same things. And so it's so important that we work together on this stuff.
I'm Jim, you're muted, but I'm glad you brought up the Sound Money Index, because when I was researching for who is already in the space, because I think collaboration is the right word, because it's going to take all of us.
Oh yeah.
I think there is a sense of camaraderie, though, that we're seeing with Wall Street Silver and with us, some of us OG Ron Paul folks. And but when I saw your website and what you had done with this, I was blown away, because I've had to do some of that sort of grunt work of putting together data and gather things, and it is an incredible resource. It's very easy to understand. It's very interactive. Obviously, you can go, I mean, it's alphabetical order. Just see where your state's at, and then you can see kind of where the opportunities are. But I just want to compliment you on your work, because I know how much work that is. And it's such a great tool. So I highly recommend people go. It's free. You can download the whole thing, or you can look at it online, whatever. I'll link it in the video, but some great work. And then, of course, like you said, we've got some states moving forward. And I think you're going to have more opportunities sort of as this legislative season goes on, do you think? Or, I mean, kind of what's the forecast?
Yeah, so on those 5 states on the sales tax side, that, you know, a couple of those states really look promising. We're excited to be able to work in those states. There are a couple defensive battles that are taking place. Alabama and Virginia have a sunset date coming up, and so we're working in those states to extend those sunsets or even eliminate those sunsets. In Oklahoma and West Virginia, they're thinking about eliminating capital gains on the sale side when you go to sell your precious metals. Washington State has introduced a bill that they want to eliminate all taxation, any sort of tax liability that could ever exist on gold transactions. They want to eliminate that outright. And then Oklahoma's becoming a sound money powerhouse here, where they're thinking about not only eliminating capital gains, but they're also wanting to empower the state treasurer to be able to legally hold physical gold in some of these taxpayer investment funds. And they're also wanting to do an in-state bullion depository, similar to the one that Texas did a decade or so ago. And so a lot of these projects have real steam behind them. We're excited to see where they go. We'll be providing updates on our site on soundmoneydefense.org and on Money Metals Exchange. I'm sure that Citizens for Sound Money will also be tracking these battles, and we'll be reaching out to their supporters, to your supporters as well. So yeah, I'm really excited, especially over the last couple of years, because the chart is moving upwards, right? States are largely realizing the importance of this stuff, and over the last even 5 or 6 years, we've seen, almost 10 states that have passed these laws, and so it's been promising. We're hoping for a good turnout this year.
That's great. Sorry, I was muted because my dog was barking, and then I forgot to unmute. Yeah, like Marian said, we love what you guys are doing. And when we started up, we had every intention of getting involved in the political process, but we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So we are super happy to collaborate and work with you versus trying to duplicate what you're doing. Happy to go to different states as you need us, try to get our members involved. Definitely very excited to be working together. I want to ask you about, because you had some comments on Twitter about some people were trying to, make cryptocurrencies legal tender. Can you talk about what is legal tender and why maybe that's not a good idea to ask to be legal tender?
Sure. Yeah. So legal tender as a concept has been around for a long time, and this predates the United States. Of course, you can go back to the days of Marco Polo in 1400s. And I think that's probably the first recorded instance that you see of legal tender as we know it to exist today. And then in American history, coming up into the Civil War, Lincoln had to fund the war. And so back then you needed to have the equivalent amount of gold in a safe somewhere to print dollars. And so they weren't able to do that if they wanted to fund the Civil War. And so Lincoln declared the first Legal Tender Act, where, this is an act where the government waves its monetary wand and it ascribes monetary properties to things that don't naturally have them. So gold, for example, doesn't need to be legal tender. It doesn't need the approval of the government to be sound money, because it is sound money. It's been around for thousands of years. It's been chosen by the market, and it has retained its value. However, on the other hand, the Federal Reserve note, the piece of paper that's unbacked, that is completely unauditable, that we have no idea how many of them exist out in the world today, this only has value behind the full faith and credit of the United States, whatever that means. And so it's a completely trust-based system. And so legal tender as a concept, it runs incongruent to what Bitcoiners say they believe, right? Asking for, being a supporter or an advocate for permissionless money and asking the government, in this case, Arizona is the state in question that passed or that introduced a bill to make Bitcoin legal tender. It seems like that runs against Bitcoin's stated goals. The supporters of Bitcoin aren't here for, the stamp of approval from the government. They don't want to be, they don't need to be validated by the government as money. They don't need to be affirmed as money because money isn't determined by the government. Money's value is not derived from the government. That it's about the properties that money has inherently in it. And so it seems to me a waste of time, a waste of effort to take a permissionless money and run around looking for approval and permission from a government. It kind of seems like a waste of time. And for that reason, we have the Sound Money Defense League will support any bills like that, but we've kind of stopped spearheading efforts to push this legal tender concept because most people don't understand it. And it's largely a waste of time and effort that can be taken somewhere else. So in Bitcoin's case, there's a lot that can be done, surely, to free Bitcoin, or at least to make sure that lawmakers don't make it difficult for Bitcoin use and Bitcoin transactions to take place. But among those, I don't believe legal tender efforts is a valuable one among those efforts.
Yeah. So I love what you said, money not defined by the government. And that's something people, we have a short attention span, a short memory, right? Mm-hmm. Gold and silver didn't become money because some government said so. They just were money. They arose naturally out of trade and wanting to have a better medium of exchange than, trading chickens for cows and right. Having some intermediary thing. And that's something people don't understand. That's a big push in our effort is, beside the legislative part, our big focus so far has been encouraging people to use sound money, and they don't need the permission from the government, nor should they ask. Mm-hmm. We need to get sales tax and capital gains tax and those things out of the way, but we don't need a legal tender act. We don't need the dollar to be backed by gold. We can just use gold ourselves.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I got really excited, because I think our focus needs to be removing the impediments rather than having the government recognize, or, mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we're fighting against, is their involvement in the exchange between a person to a person or a business to a business. That's our problem, is there's too many layers in between. And so I think that's the real legislative battle, is to almost like, I shouldn't compare it to decriminalization of drugs, but it feels a bit like that, where when you said the word remonetize, where basically we're freeing the impediments of money exchange.
Right. And freeing the impediments, then also just people like us reminding people that it is money and that you can use it.
Right.
But yeah, my read of legal tender is it's essentially a mandate. It says if somebody wants to buy something from you and they have dollars, you must accept them.
And even that isn't necessarily true. There are places, where you can't spend US dollars. For example, there are gas stations all around the country that say $100 bills not accepted, or there are public transit systems around the country that you're not allowed to use US dollars. You can only use change. That might not exist anymore, but until recently, stuff like that did exist. So the legal tender, the actual benefit that might come from passing a legal tender law is only so that in contracts, if there is a payment, by default, the legal tender is what the default judgment would be. So if if we wrote a contract for a year from now and you wanted to be paid in $1,000, the default would be in US dollars. But if what you wanted to do was to make sure that you can do gold and silver in those transactions, it would be much easier to just pass a law that guarantees specific performance. That if the contract says, I want to be paid in gold, the US dollar, the Federal Reserve note, is not a reasonable substitute. The specific performance calls for exactly what it says in the contract. And so that's the only real benefit, I think, to passing something like this legal tender law. And instead of dealing with this like really sort of esoteric, poorly understood concept, it's if that's what you want to accomplish, just pass a specific performance law. There's no need to get into this like murky sort of not understood concept to accomplish what it is that this would accomplish in practice anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to be a business and you know, say you don't like Bitcoin for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, if it's legal tender, does that mean you have to accept it?
No.
And you know, I mean, because right now you can accept Bitcoin, you can
Sure.
gold,
Yeah.
silver as payment. There's nothing stopping you. It's just
Mm-hmm.
the government's not telling you you must, kind of thing.
Right.
Right. Marian, did you have other questions? JP, stuff you want to talk about? I think we're hitting a lot of the stuff we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and my main thing, you know, as we're probably kind of getting towards the end here, is action steps. Like what can people do, say today, sort of to move sound money forward? Just one or two easy things, because again, I think I like to demystify it for people from my background. Like they think it's this big behemoth, which is kind of true, especially at the federal level. But
Mm-hmm.
man, like you're saying, if 3 or 4 people called a small state legislature like Arkansas, I mean, that guy probably got 3 calls, and then he was like,
Yeah, and it gets their attention immediately.
Absolutely. And so you named some states. If there's not something currently going in their state, what is something they can do to sort of move the ball forward?
Yeah, so feel free definitely to follow us, the Sound Money Defense League and Money Metals Exchange, where we'll be posting, you know, regular updates, legislative updates on all of this. The Sound Money Index is a great resource for that. And groups like Citizens for Sound Money, groups like Campaign for Liberty, groups like Young Americans for Liberty, groups, these state initiative-based groups that have just decided to forego the federal level and really target, you know, states where real change can take place. I think that's going to be our best effort, big strategy wise. So please follow us. If you're in any of those states, please, you feel free to contact me. I can give you a script, talking points. I can provide information on these bills and why you should support them, and what you can say to your representative if you want to write them or call them. This is all stuff that we'll provide, educational resources, contact information even. So just stay up to date with us, with what you guys are doing. And I think, you know, like we were saying, collaboration, the teamwork is what makes the dream work. And, you know, working together, I think we have a good chance to really make a difference this year.
Absolutely. I definitely think we do. Yeah, so we'll make sure to get all, you know, links and everything into the description of the video. So definitely check that out. Citizens for Sound Money, there's a mailing list people can sign up for on our website. We'll keep people in the loop on your efforts as much as possible. If they're interested in using Sound Money, that's kind of where we, you know, add that element to it. But definitely we will work with you on legislative process, and highly recommend people sign up to keep in the loop with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And just in general, or for the record, Money Metals Exchange, who is in collaboration, a large donor to the Sound Money Defense League project, they too are big on getting people to use Sound Money and automating it so that it doesn't even, like this, a once a month thing. You can dollar cost average if you wanted to, and you don't even have to worry about, you know, what's coming out when. It's a super simple process. It's an easy way to get people into Sound Money. So on top of the educational resources, the guides, the state laws, why all of those are important, Money Metals also provides an avenue to get forward, or to get started with actual investing and using of Sound Money if you'd like.
Excellent. Yeah, and people might look at that at conflict of interest, you know, because they're selling gold and silver, but I don't see it that way. It's more they're selling gold and silver because they believe in it.
Right. This is Stefan is definitely he's got an ideological background, worked at Right to Work for a long time. So this is someone that understands the importance of sound money and the importance of the public policy and the political process. And so this is very much because honestly, so at first, when we started passing these laws, this was pre-Wayfair, the Supreme Court ruling that forces states to collect sales tax on behalf of the state. And so when we started this project, every time we passed a law, this would actively hurt money metals exchange, because people could now just buy in their own state. They could go to their own local coin shop and not have to do it online. And so at first, Stefan was okay. Like we decided that removing the taxes, even if it harmed, the bottom line of the company, ideologically, that was what was more important. And now because of the Supreme Court rulings where the Supreme Court has ruled that the businesses have to act as a bagman, as a bully for these state laws that they're being forced to enforce on behalf of the state. That has changed a little bit, but yeah, this is largely an ideological mission here. And we're interested in eliminating any of the impediments to using sound money, to buying sound money, regardless of anything else that might affect.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I definitely appreciate the time. We'd like to have you on more in the future as new bills and stuff come up. Happy to have you back anytime.
Yeah, anytime. I'm happy to come back. Thank you all, Marian, Jim. Thank you guys for having me. This was awesome. Thank you guys for the work you're doing. And I'm sure we'll be in touch.
All right. Sounds good.